Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Monday, March 7th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The spring game is in 41 days, the Notre Dame game in 181 days, the game against Michigan in 265 days. We are wrapping up our spring football preview series today with the spot on the field that always gets the most attention. That, of course, is the quarterbacks. My guest today is the quarterback of the Buckeye Scoop podcast network. He is Kevin Noon. He is the host of the Big Me Kickoff podcast. Kevin, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Hopefully I don't get sacked here.
We'll start with hopefully an easy one for you. Who is the guy who has the most to gain this spring out of the quarterback position at Ohio State?
Well, I mean, obviously we have an incumbent quarterback who's proven plenty. Then we got two younger guys. I'm just going to say Kyle McCord right here because he has to be thinking not only about 22, but needs to be thinking about 23. He's got a young upstart behind him in Devin Brown. In doing all of that, it's going to be interesting to see what this year is going to look like for him. He got a little bit of a taste of things last season in a support role of CJ Stroud. But what's he going to be able to look like as he really is going to try and cement himself in as the number two, as you bring in a talented guy like Devin Brown behind him? It'll be interesting because this will not be a year of where it's a quarterback derby at the top of the rotation. Last year, we certainly heard plenty of people saying, as CJ Stroud, especially prior to the Akron game where he sat out due to his shoulder, saying, "Oh, they made the wrong decision." Well, we at least we know who's at the top, so it's going to be very important for McCord right here.
Yeah, that's that I think is my answer there for this question for sure. He's got the opportunity to potentially be cement that number two spot with Devin Brown coming in. This is kind of similar to the wide receiver conversation we had a few days ago. There's so much talent. It's just 5-star after 5-star, and it's like you're one of the very best in the country. Well, so's the guy behind you, and so's the guy ahead of you. So you gotta continue to grow and develop to maintain your spot or potentially move up the pecking order at some point. So yeah, I think that's a good answer. And I don't know that there is an answer for the second question, which is who is there is this a make or break spring for? Is there an answer to that? It doesn't, I don't know that there is someone who really fits this question in this case.
I don't think so, because it's not like they're going out and playing games. It's not like there's exhibition games and you could sit there and see if CJ Stroud has regressed. I mean, we're going to be seeing very limited bits and pieces of practice. We're going to be seeing a spring game at Ohio Stadium on April 16th. It's going to be really hard to kind of see what's going on there. So, you can't put Stroud there. You really, I don't think you can put either of the other guys in there either, because of the situation of you have Devin Brown, who has not done anything other than winter conditioning, and then you've got Kyle McCord, who's still a young guy at this point. So, and it's not even like they necessarily they're not going to have the same walk-on quarterbacks that they had from last year with Jagger LaRoe and other names escaping me right now. Yeah, JP Andrade, both off to new programs at this point. So, it's not even that we can leave the 85 and say, well, it's make or break for somebody there, because those guys have already moved on to new programs. Best of luck and success at your new stops, and you're just going to have CJ Stroud and a bunch of guys in the room with him.
Yeah, and I think that you pretty much diagnosed it correctly there. So I'm going to move on to another one that I think this is probably, of all the questions we've asked on all of these shows, this is probably the easiest one. But Kevin, will you let our listeners know who's going to be the star player in that quarterback room this fall?
Yeah. I'm thinking about that one. It's going to be CJ Stroud. He finished 4th in the Heisman voting last year, was not happy with that, came out and went on social media, but basically saying this is how villains are made. Comes out in the Rose Bowl and just lands the flying elbow on Utah. And even with all of his efforts, Ohio State still had to hold on for dear life in that game. But I think that CJ Stroud is going to come out and have a tremendous year. I mean, he's first or second. I've seen him as low as third on a lot of these futures Heisman picks right now. It's pretty simple there. It'll be really interesting to see what year 2 of a starter looks like there versus year 1. I mean, we've talked about it earlier on a previous morning scoop about, what kind of expectations can we have from year 1 to year 2 with a starting quarterback. Results are kind of inconclusive, but there's the one thing that's not inconclusive is CJ Stroud is the star of this room. He's the guy, he's the head honcho, and everybody's going to be looking toward him.
And yeah, this feels like this might be the 2020 season that we didn't get to see out of Justin Fields, where the first season as a starter, the redshirt freshman season, was so impressive. And it's like, well, how much better can this guy get in his third season, his second season as a starter? And then Fields had that weird wonky spring and a much, short and compressed summer, and really disjointed third season. And he still had a great season, but you didn't get the full spring, the full summer, all of that and the wide receiver talent that he's working with, that CJ Stroud is working with this fall, is really exciting. So yeah, I am legitimately intrigued to see just how high those numbers might end up this fall. The only thing that might keep his keep those numbers down a little bit is if the defense is a little better. You don't necessarily need to be throwing the whole game like you were against Utah in the Rose Bowl. So that may keep his numbers down a little bit. But yeah, just how high do these numbers go? What is the best possible quarterback season for in a Ryan Day offense? We might find out this fall. So that's a good answer. This one probably there's really only one possible answer here: the freshman, whether redshirt or true, who you're most excited to see this spring.
I'm really excited to see what Devin Brown brings, because let's remember the shuffle that we had in the quarterback room. You end up having Quinn Ewers, who's supposed to be their 22 quarterback, who reclassifies to 21, comes in, makes a good amount of NIL money. It's like, okay, that's cool. I'm out. Okay, hook him, and goes to Texas. You end up not landing Drew Allar, who ends up, on Ohio end, who ends up going to Penn State, but Ohio State goes out and lands Devin Brown out of, most recently out of Utah. I mean, he spent time in Arizona. His high school coach when he was in Arizona was none other than Joe Germain of Ohio State fame. So I'm going to be really interested in seeing what Devin Brown is going to be able to do, because there are a lot of people out there that, we all love making predictions who are like, Devin Brown is every bit as talented to be able to come out when they're looking for a new quarterback in 23. Could he beat out Kyle McCord? Well, let's see the young man throw a pass even in practice before we get to that point. But there's no denying how talented he is. I think he's going to be somebody that's going to come out and in just the devil we don't know versus the devil we do. I guarantee you, coming out of the spring game, regardless of what things look like, they're going to be people saying, Devin Brown absolutely needs to have X amount of pass attempts during this season. I promise you, it's like the Swallows returning to Capistrano every spring. It's going to happen, but I think it's going to be warranted, at least in the bit of Devin Brown is that talented that he's going to impress a lot of people.
Yeah, he's a good answer, and he really is the answer here, because there's really only one freshman, because McCord played enough that he is a sophomore this year. So there really is only one answer here. But yeah, he's someone who he's in an enviable position, because he's going to get a decent amount of snaps as the number 3 guy, but there's not a ton of pressure on him. So this is a big year for him in order to potentially set himself up for a legit quarterback battle with Kyle McCord a year from now. But there's not a ton of pressure on him right now. So, and this is he's a little bit like Nick Petit-Frere, where you thought you had a 5-star, and you thought you had Quinn Ewers, and then Quinn Ewers leaves. You thought you had Jackson Carman a few years ago as an offensive tackle, and then he goes somewhere else, and I guess we'll fill in that hole with Nick Petit-Frere, and that worked out just fine. He has potential to be the Nick Petit-Frere in this case, where the last minute fill-in who is also a 5-star, who also has a chance to be a multi-year starter at Ohio State. So that's Devin Brown. What is the biggest concern in the quarterback room? Because it feels like you have your starter. There's not a question about the starter. You've seen the backup, and the backup is, even last year, the backup was pretty decent. So what is the biggest concern in that quarterback room to you?
I've got 2 concerns. Number one is that there are 3 scholarship quarterbacks in that room. And, I'm a big superstition person. I don't like to speak things into existence, but there are 3 quarterbacks in that room, so there's not a lot of depth. What happens if somebody decides that they're just, I'm out of here. I'm gonna portal out of here. We know that we're seeing the end of the Stroud era here at Ohio State after this year. I mean, I don't think we need to write a lot of CJ Stroud, CJ Stroud is coming back stories, because I think we're at the end of it. So there's going to be the concern there. I think my other concern too is, how do you have an encore for what we saw last season? We talk about the sophomore slump in terms of anybody that young that has that great first season, albeit as a starter versus, first season within a program. Does he press too hard? I mean, does Ohio State get too cute with some things that it tries to do there? I mean, obviously we've seen what it will look like in a lot of regards with what we saw in the Rose Bowl with no Garrett Wilson, with no Chris Olave. So we know what the offense would look like without them, but there's no MPF, there's no Thayer Munford. They could have to shuffle some things around. What happens there? So between those two things, I would probably say, I'm still kind of a depth guy. I think the depth concerns me the most, just because 3 is a very small number.
Yeah, that is, we have seen a season rather famously where Ohio State got down to its third string quarterback in the college football playoff, and they do not have a guy who is in his third year as they did back then with Cardale Jones. They have a guy who is in his first year as the third string guy. So that's something to keep an eye on. And Ryan Day has talked about maybe wanting to, maybe you find a portal guy if you find the right fit, even if it's just a veteran guy who just wants to come and does not come in with the expectation of starting. Can you get a Gunnar Hoke, a Chris Chugginoff type to come in and just provide a little bit more veteran depth in that room? That I think is sort of an open question as they kind of head into this spring and the summer, and that'll be resolved. You will probably see a flood of people entering the portal after spring ball. That's how it traditionally goes. So will they be able to find a match there? That is sort of an open question. But yeah, I think you got the concern there exactly right, but not a position where Ohio State fans have a ton of concerns. And as far as concerns to have entering spring ball, that is probably not the worst one. And if you got 3 guys entering spring ball healthy and 3 guys leaving spring ball healthy, that's probably a pretty big win for the quarterback position at Ohio State. So thank you again to Kevin for joining me. If you enjoy hearing Kevin talking about football, make sure you check out his Big Me Kickoff podcast. You can find that wherever you find the Morning Scoop and all of our other great podcasts. Just search Big Me Kickoff to find that, and you can subscribe right there and leave him a 5-star rating and review. And if you want to do that for all of our great podcasts, including Buckeye Weekly and Gives in the Bank and Around the Oval, and of course the Morning Scoop, we appreciate all of that. You can subscribe to them, leave us a 5-star rating and review. That's something you can do that just takes a second. That will really help us out with other folks finding these shows. So we do appreciate when you're able to do that for us. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.